Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. When the United States launched military strikes against Iran, many people expected a familiar pattern in global politics. For decades, whenever Washington went to war, one country was almost always by its side, the United Kingdom. Yet this time, Britain's response was noticeably cautious. London made it clear that it was not participating in offensive operations against Iran. British officials emphasized that their role would be limited to defensive measures, protecting shipping routes in the region, positioning military assets in case the conflict escalated, and coordinating with allies on contingency plans, such as evacuations or maritime security. That decision immediately raised an interesting question. If the United Kingdom has historically been America's closest military partner, why did it hold back this time? To understand the significance of Britain's position today, it helps to look back at the long history of US-UK military cooperation. In the modern era, the two countries have often described their relationship as the special relationship, a phrase that reflects deep intelligence sharing, military integration, and a shared strategic outlook. When the United States led the international coalition during the Gulf War, British forces played a major role alongside American troops in pushing Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. British aircraft, ground forces, and naval units all participated in the campaign, making the United Kingdom the second-largest contributor to the coalition effort. A decade later, after the terrorist attacks of 9/11-2001, the United States launched military operations in Afghanistan. Once again, Britain joined immediately. Over the course of the war in Afghanistan, tens of thousands of British soldiers served in Afghanistan, particularly in the volatile Helmand province. British forces fought intense battles alongside American troops, and the United Kingdom ultimately became one of the largest non-US contributors to the war effort. Then came one of the most controversial conflicts of the early 21st century, the Iraq War. When the United States decided to invade Iraq, Britain was the only major European power to send a large combat force. The decision was championed by then Prime Minister Tony Blair, who strongly supported U.S. President George W. Bush. British troops were responsible for securing southern Iraq, including the city of Basra, and remained deployed there for several years. Taken together, these examples illustrate a consistent pattern. For decades, the United Kingdom functioned as America's most dependable military ally. When Washington led international military operations, London usually joined. That history makes Britain's more cautious approach toward the recent U.S. strikes on Iran stand out even more. So what changed? Several major factors help explain the shift. The first is the lasting political shadow of the Iraq War. In the years after the 2003 invasion, many people in Britain began to question the intelligence and decision-making that led to the conflict. Critics argued that the case for war, particularly the claim that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, had been overstated or based on flawed intelligence assessments. Public trust in the government's handling of the war gradually eroded. Eventually, the British government launched a major investigation known as the Chilcot Report. When the report was finally released, it concluded that the United Kingdom had joined the war before peaceful options had been fully exhausted, and that the planning for the aftermath of the invasion had been inadequate. The political impact of that report was profound. It fundamentally changed the way British leaders think about military intervention, especially in the Middle East. Since then, governments in London have been much more cautious about committing British forces to large overseas conflicts. Even leaders who maintain strong ties with Washington are aware that public and parliamentary scrutiny will be intense if the country is asked to join another war. This leads to the second major factor, public opinion. After 2 decades of involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, the British public has grown increasingly skeptical about military interventions abroad. The human and financial costs of those wars were significant, and many voters now question whether such conflicts truly serve the country's long-term interests. In today's political climate, any British government considering military action must weigh the likelihood of strong domestic opposition. Unlike in earlier decades, joining an American-led war is no longer politically straightforward. A third reason involves Britain's changing strategic priorities. In recent years, European security concerns have shifted dramatically. The most important turning point was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Since that moment, the United Kingdom and many other NATO countries have focused heavily on strengthening defenses in Europe and supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression. British military resources, from intelligence support to weapons deliveries, are deeply engaged in that effort. Opening another large military commitment in the Middle East could stretch those resources even further, something many defense planners are eager to avoid. Military capacity also plays a role. While Britain still maintains one of the most capable armed forces in Europe, the size of its military has declined compared with the early 2000s. Budget pressures, structural reforms, and evolving defense strategies have reshaped the British military over the past 2 decades. As a result, leaders today must be more selective about where and how they deploy forces abroad. Taken together, these factors help explain why Britain chose a more restrained response this time. The country still values its close alliance with the United States, but it is also balancing domestic politics, military resources, and shifting strategic priorities. However, the story doesn't end there. While several traditional Western European powers have become more cautious about supporting U.S. military action, another group of countries within Europe has been moving in the opposite direction. And among them, one country stands out in particular: Poland. In fact, during recent geopolitical crises, Poland has often emerged as one of the most strongly pro-American voices in Europe. Its position tends to be more aligned with Washington's security outlook than that of many Western European capitals. Understanding why requires looking at Poland's recent history and strategic mindset. First, Poland has become one of the most pro-American countries in Europe. Over the past 2 decades, it has consistently supported U.S. military operations and international security initiatives. During the Iraq War, Poland deployed thousands of troops to Iraq and even took responsibility for administering a sector of the occupation zone. This was a significant commitment for a country whose armed forces were still undergoing modernization after the Cold War. Poland also participated extensively in the war in Afghanistan. Polish soldiers served alongside NATO allies for many years, contributing combat troops and logistical support. These deployments reinforced Poland's reputation as a reliable partner in coalition operations. Among European nations, Poland became one of the few countries consistently willing to deploy forces alongside the United States in demanding military missions. But Poland's close alignment with Washington is driven by more than just alliance solidarity. The country's entire national security strategy is shaped by a single overarching concern: Russia. For centuries, Poland's history has been deeply influenced by its geographic position between powerful neighbors. That history includes invasions, occupations, and long periods during which Poland struggled to maintain its sovereignty. As a result, Polish strategic thinking is highly focused on preventing external domination and maintaining strong security guarantees. In the modern era, this concern has centered on Russia, and since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that concern has intensified dramatically. For many policymakers in Warsaw, the war in Ukraine reinforced a long-held belief that Russia remains a major security threat to Eastern Europe. From Poland's perspective, the United States is the most important guarantor of security against that threat. While NATO provides the formal alliance structure, American military power is widely viewed as the backbone of the alliance's deterrence capabilities. As a result, Polish leaders have often pursued a pragmatic diplomatic strategy by supporting U.S. global leadership and maintaining close defense cooperation with Washington. Poland strengthens the likelihood that the United States will remain deeply engaged in European security. This strategic calculation has shaped Poland's defense policies in very visible ways. Over the past several years, Poland has dramatically increased its defense spending and launched one of the most ambitious military modernization programs in Europe. The country aims not only to strengthen its own defenses, but also to become a leading military power within NATO's eastern flank. A key part of that effort involves acquiring advanced American weapons systems. Poland has purchased large numbers of the M1A2 Abrams, one of the most sophisticated main battle tanks currently in service. The country has also ordered the stealth fighter jet, known as the F-35 Lightning II, which will significantly enhance Poland's air power and interoperability with U.S. forces. In addition, Poland has invested heavily in air defense systems, including the Patriot missile system, designed to intercept incoming missiles and aircraft. These acquisitions are not just about technology, they also deepen the operational ties between Polish and American forces. Shared equipment, training programs, and logistical networks make it easier for the two militaries to operate together in a crisis. Over time, this kind of integration tends to reinforce political alignment as well. All of these developments point toward a broader shift within Europe. For much of the post-Cold War period, the continent's strategic leadership was dominated by major Western European powers such as Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. These countries played central roles in shaping European Union policies, NATO strategy, and diplomatic initiatives across the continent. But the geopolitical landscape is evolving. In recent years, countries in Eastern Europe, particularly Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia, have become increasingly influential in security discussions because of their proximity to Russia and their historical experiences. These nations often take a more urgent view of defense and deterrence. Their strategic priorities sometimes differ from those of Western European governments, which may place greater emphasis on diplomacy, economic stability, or managing relations with multiple global powers. As a result, debates within Europe about security policy have become more dynamic. In many ways, the center of gravity in European security discussions is gradually shifting eastward. The countries that once formed the front line during the Cold War are now some of the most vocal advocates for stronger military preparedness and deeper transatlantic cooperation. Seen in that broader context, Britain's cautious response and Poland's strong pro-American stance are not contradictory developments. Instead, they reflect the changing dynamics of Europe itself. Western European powers are increasingly cautious about large-scale military interventions, while Eastern European nations are pushing for stronger security commitments and closer ties with the United States. Taken together, these trends suggest that the future of European security may be shaped by a more diverse set of voices than in the past. And as geopolitical tensions continue to evolve, the balance of influence within Europe may continue shifting toward the East. Thanks for watching.